the ability in the winter to like strap on, waders, get out in the water with snow around when you hear the water and, it's just quiet and you're just figuring out where beaver and otters are swimming. Like that's the coolest thing in the world.
Zach, thank you for coming, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk.
So yeah, speaking of 6 a.m. training at Alliance, the biggest problem is that you have the biggest guys that train at Alliance 6 a.m. You got this guy, Matt, who's the Eagle High School wrestling coach. And he was telling me, he's like, yeah, I've lost 25 pounds. He's like, I'm shooting for another 25. Like, that's great. Like, what is that going to get you down to? He wants to shoot for 260. Like right now, he's literally clocking into 300 pounds and he's been a wrestling coach for 18 years. Then you got Mark Maxfield, who's a tank. He sent me a picture like 7 months ago because I was like, Mark, you're looking pretty jacked these days. He sends me a picture. Apparently he did a bodybuilding competition like a year or two ago, right? You got Seth, who's the correctional officer, who's I think like 3% body fat and 235. Yep. You got Anthony Ronaldo, who's just like, that guy grabs onto me and it's horrifying. You have and they're all training at 6 a.m. So I'm like marginally awake and then they just try to break me in half.
Not for me, man. I did it with Gigi and that crew at the old place at 6 a.m. and just, I kept hurting myself. It's just like running into a brick wall every morning. Yeah. And couldn't do it. Got to go at noon. I got to limber up. I got to get a workout in first before I go through the gauntlet.
Yeah, it's a lot. There's one of my buddies there, Dave. He I guess gets up like 2 hours early, gets the paper, gets a cup of coffee, sits in his hot tub. Like he goes through a full 2-hour ritual before he comes in. And then he's like good to go. But it's like, I ain't got no time for that, man.
Well, same. And that's what I did. Like when I was coming to 6 a.m. and that was the only option when I was kind of back and forth between the cabins, was get up even earlier. So 4 a.m., get my coffee so I can, go to the bathroom, do all that, try to do like stretching. And even then it just wasn't consistent enough for me to stick with it.
Oh my God. I can't believe I forgot. Mario McCracken.
Oh,
get the hell out. Get the hell, like he is
ginormous and strong and too handsome for his own good.
Okay. Let's not get crazy. Okay. But man, those guys, they're great. They're great to have. They're great to train with, but it is one of those things. It's like, if we could just make this a couple hours later, I would just appreciate it.
Noon class, baby. That's all me.
Yeah. The noon class is really fun. Friday noon class, when they just roll for an hour straight, no gi. That is like, especially in the summer, that's a real fun class to hit.
Yeah. It's fun. I did my stint at 10th Planet in Austin for a couple of years. So, every time I get back to no-gi,
everybody has a bad ex-girlfriend. Like everybody's like, oh, I did my time at 10th Planet.
I know. I got to hide my like goofy rash guards and my spats, right? Matching. No, I never got into it that badly. Thankfully, I didn't get infected too bad.
No, but like, okay. Everybody knows if you're like hook, line, and sinker into like the jiu-jitsu lifestyle, you talk a little bit about it. Maybe you talk too much about it, and that's fine. Like people can be forgiven, but it's not quite CrossFit level where it's like, you want to know if somebody does CrossFit? Don't worry. They'll let you know. Yeah. Right. Yep. But guys who do 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu, they're on that. Yeah. They're like on that CrossFit plane about like the secret alien techniques or something. There was a guy that I used to train with infrequently, but I would, and he was this really, really great black belt, like world-class level. And man, the things that would come out of his mouth, I'm like, is this for real? Like, are you recording me? Like,
it's partial joke. I remember vividly going to training. It was a morning class in Austin, half awake. And then like we start going through technique, they do a lot of drilling, like chain drilling. Yeah. And then I just remember them saying, okay, now we're going to go to Tower 7, and I'm just like, okay, well, yeah, it was 6 a.m., but we're learning the Tower 7, I guess, it's comical, but Yeah, if it works, it works.
Like I have an appreciation for like there are two sets of people who name things. One, you have like the OG Japanese, like like can't do that. I don't know any of that. And then you have the 10th Planet guys who are like, oh, we're gonna do the dump from the truck on the Macmillan or something, and you're like, what do you mean? And then there's just me who's like, no, I just do moves. Like
just
I don't
call it a calf slicer,
right? Like MTU Studios is the proud producer for the Ada County Sheriff Podcast, the Idaho Wildlife Wildlife Federation podcast, the State Representative Ted Hill podcast, the Idaho State PTA podcast, and many more. If you or your organization is thinking about starting a podcast, MTU Studios would love to help. Just check out mtustudios.com. I go for the sub. Like, I don't even know which sub it is. I don't know how it is. There's one move that I started doing years back that's a 2-arm in triangle.
Okay.
So like from full guard. And I started doing it from no-gi because, again, getting an arm out. But there's a way. I have long legs and they're pretty flexible. And I guess, okay, there's a move. There's the guard called, I think, mission control from the 10th Planet guys, where you get a leg real high on the guy's shoulders from full guard. You can come across, cross arm, palm facing you, grab your own heel, then wrap your other leg in like a figure four, and it turns into a 2-arm in triangle, right? Yep. Apparently that's called the dead oak triangle or something. And again, I just do the moves. They're like, oh, you did the dead oak. I'm like, just stop.
You need like a dictionary with you. That's the problem I have, is I don't have a good enough memory. Whether it's the Japanese names, whether it's the 10th Planet names, like I'm too much of a, 23andMe told me I have too much, the DNA of being a knuckle dragger to remember any of that. Just give me side control, basic passing, and I'll be good to go.
You're a purple belt, right?
Yeah.
Did you get your purple belt from the Alliance program?
No, so I got my blue belt from Alliance a long time ago when I was like 16, 17 back in Georgia from Bull Shaw, the big guy back in Georgia. And then I just wrestled high school, college, and I was overseas for a long time. So I bounced around gyms, got my purple belt at a checkmat gym back in Louisiana, and then I think 4 stripe now, and just kind of riding the wave. Just ride the wave, baby. Long journey, 12-year blue belt, 6-year purple belt. It's just that journey,
dude. The 4 stripe purple belt, I remember those days, and that's right there, man. Because once you go brown belt, you're like, okay, brown, black, we're good, awesome. But the 4 stripe purple, you are like the king of those guys, like the lower belts. I just asked because the protocol that like testing you have to go through at Alliance. Thank God I got my black belt like long time ago, and not Alliance affiliated, not because I dislike Alliance, but just because there's no way I would ever, like, I couldn't pass the blue belt test. They were asking about like the origins of jiu-jitsu, like what these specific names. I'm like, I don't know any of this stuff. Like, I know the moves.
Hey, I'm locked in to be a purple belt for life. So if I can't figure all that out, I'm okay with it.
You're locked. Just get locked in, baby. It'd be fine.
I'd rather be the best purple belt in the room than,
a bad brown belt.
Exactly.
Why don't you be a good brown belt, but just learn the names? It's not for me, but I love it for you.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. So listen, we got connected not just through jiu-jitsu, but also because you're a hunter, you're a trapper, you are a transplant from somewhere else. So you're kind of like a citizen of the world. And I have an appreciation for that. And you wrote this book, Turning Feral, which I, again, so appreciate. I think you're kind of tapping into an aspect of, look, have we over domesticated people? And it was kind of an odd realization that I came to as an adult when I really realized, like, okay, you just really like fighting, and like, that's all right. And a very good friend of mine, Dave Anderson, who's also a black belt, lives in Utah. He was like, listen, I'm a sportsman, and he wrestled at BYU, unbelievable athlete and unbelievable training partner and great person. But he kind of articulated, it's like, listen, stop feeling bad about liking fighting. Just let it go, right? Like, it's all right. And I think there's an aspect of that kind of, okay, you shouldn't be like this, that's really pervasive in society when we're raising young men.
Man, you hit on so many different topics that are a passion point for me. For the record, right, I am an adult onset, which a lot of people don't really like that terminology. Adult onset hunter, trapper, outdoorsman. I grew up very suburban in the Southeast. I always had hunting on the periphery, right? I grew up in Georgia, South Carolina. There were always good old boys, friends in my network that hunted, but it just never spoke to me. There was never a need, and I've always been need driven. And part of my need as a young man was to fight. So I was drawn to combat sports, wrestled high school, college, or part of college. And then I've always done jujitsu. Everywhere I've been, I've just kind of found gyms and trained, right? It just scratched an itch, like this masculine itch to, lock horns, I guess, and go after that. But for me, it was an interesting evolution where I realized as I got into my 30s, and I was doing jujitsu.
Pull this just a little bit closer.
We can do that. That better.
You don't have to be on top of it, but yeah. Okay,
you
go.
Don't like that image. Anyways, long story short, I was always seeking some sort of challenge. I was doing ultra marathons. My ex-wife and I were just competing in jiu-jitsu all the time, IBJJF tournaments every weekend. And it consumed us. And I was always looking for a challenge. But what I realized is there was never a consequence to those challenges, a real consequence. It was always fabricated. I could always tap out.
Right.
I could always stop a run. I could always quit a workout. Not that I would regularly, but like if it got too intense for whatever reason, I could always stop.
Right.
And
it was sport competition.
Right. And I think there was always this drive of like going a little further and a little further to the point where, in competition, we were refining everything we did in our life down to our diet. And that's really what actually got me into hunting was diet. I was cutting weight still as an adult. So I'm like, where's my meat coming from now? That was becoming a little more popular. And I'm like, okay, well, what other meats outside of the grocery store are there? And there's game meat. And I found this loophole where my ex-wife's father-in-law was a hunter from Tennessee, and they always had a freezer full of white-tailed deer. And when we went home for Christmas one year, I was like, do you eat all that? And he's like, no, I just have a freezer full. Take some. So we took some, and no market performance increase from eating deer meat right away, but it felt better. And that kind of got me on this urge to say, what else is out there that I've been missing that might carry a real consequence to it, like backcountry hunting? And that's what tipped me over the edge to pick up a bow and arrow and start to figure out how to actually hunt and provide for my own food, because I had this realization that shattered my ego, which was as an adult, as a 30-year-old male, I realized that if everything hit the fan and I was on my own and I had to provide and protect my family, there's one end of that spectrum that I might have had covered, whether that's fighting, shooting, those kinds of things I was interested in, but I could not provide the most basic need, which was food. I would have had to have hoped that I hit a deer with my car, drug it over a fire, threw the carcass on, and prayed that I could pull something of value off to feed my family. So the reality was, if crap hit the fan, my family would die if I just shed all the ego. And that was the driver for me to really start to figure that side of the equation out.
God, that's such a horrifying thing. I remember when, do you remember when Katrina came by?
Oh,
I think that was like 2002?
Three?
Yeah, 2002, 2003. I remember I was on the rowing team in college, and my coach was a bit of a prepper by, like California terms.
Yeah.
Like he had some firearms. He didn't have, like a bunker, and he did, he had a couple bins of food, and that classified him more of a prepper. He had a water, like giant, 2,000 gallon water container. But his emphasis, he's like, listen to me, in a real crisis, do you think anyone's coming? And he lived in Oakland. He's like, do you think the cops are coming to help me? I live in Oakland. I got 3 kids. I got a wife. Like, no one's coming for us. The water is going to get turned off. The electricity is going to be done. And if you have something that somebody wants, they're going to take it, or you're going to stop them from taking it.
Yep.
And that always, I was like, God, Jeff, like, calm it down, man. Because I was, again, like 21, 22. But now as a father with 3 kids and a wife, having that realization, I was talking to Zach Owens about it. It's like, if things go sideways, you have the majority of people are going to be dead within 72 hours. I mean, if you don't have water, that you're not lasting that long. And the people who do have water are going to be defending it, or it's going to be taken from them, and that forcefully. There is a real aspect of, once you have the responsibility, realizing like, okay, look, man, you have this responsibility, and you also know that there's this like variable out here that could end it all, and you are woefully insufficient of securing yourself in that situation.
Yeah, it was painful to come to that realization.
Yeah.
But I think there's so many people out there, desk jockeys, like I was, still am to a certain degree, but
you can't be a desk jockey with that mustache. You cannot do it.
I do get how that could look from Zoom calls.
There you go.
But nonetheless, like, I think if you really sat down with the average person and asked, like, hey, if everything stopped, right? And if the machine stopped, would you survive? I think the first few times you ask them that, people would be like, yeah, I'd last a while. But if you got through that defensive barrier and ego, you'd have a lot of people crumbling down and be like, oh no, like I'm screwed. I'm going to be
Right.
one of those ones who are a bag of bones within 72
Yeah.
100 hours of
Yeah. Right.
things stopping.
Yeah, there's Rogan had this whenever they talk about like solar flares and stuff or meters or something. He used to say,
EMPs.
yeah, he used to say like, oh no. People would ask him like, where do you go? He's like, oh, I'm running straight at it. Like if there's an asteroid or a meteor impact and like we know it's coming, I'm not trying. He's like, I want to just go out on impact, because if it's like a 50% of the world is dead and then the other 50% are going to be scratching and clawing back in the Stone Age, like you don't want that for your kids. Like I would rather it just come down directly on my house than have to, scratch it all together. We lose the other continents and then, we lose all power and then what? Like I'm going to go chase down like a white-tailed deer with my hands or something.
Yeah, it's probably got some radioactive.
Yeah, it's probably not doing too well. So you see this deficiency in your life and you kind of realize like, all right, we got to fix this. What is that process for you? Like, what was the first step? You're kind of like, all right, I suck, right? Because like in jiu-jitsu, it's like, all right, day one, you go and I remember going into the gym day one, and this was a long time ago, and it's like, oh, I can't do anything. Like this is going to be a really long and upsetting journey.
Yes.
Every day. But
it still is. And I would, the correlation between something as difficult as jiu-jitsu, wrestling, combat sports, ultra running, it's the same with figuring out hunting and, quote, prepping, everything else. It's a never ending journey where, it's the idea of like, even when you get your black belt, it's like becoming a white belt, right? It's the starting of a new journey where you have a little bit more of a base. But what it looked like for me was phoning friends, right? I told you I was on the periphery of hunting my whole life. Like I had buddies from high school who hunted their whole lives. So I'd call them up and be, hey man, like, what is all this hunting about? And they're like, oh, you're finally coming around, man. Like you're finally seeing the light. I'm like, well, maybe let's see. So the net is I was attracted to bow hunting. I think a lot of people are now. There's a little bit of a romantic aspect to it, right? Like, again, ego probably driven it a little bit. But I found a buddy who was similar height to me, and I said, do you have like an old bow or something? He's like, yeah, in fact, I do. So I got a hand-me-down bow.
Nice.
He mailed it to me and got it in Louisiana. It had, arrows. Turns out it was about an inch too short on draw length. Things you just don't know about when you're getting started. So
I don't know what you just said, but it's okay. Keep going.
Well, people. So measuring a bow for yourself, right?
I got you.
I looked goofy is what it turned out to be. So then I started to try to figure out how to shoot arrows out of this thing. I did the cardinal sin of dry firing a bow without an arrow, which can lead to, catastrophic malfunction of your equipment right out of the gate. So just like a white belt, spazzing pretty much is what I was doing, but in the hunting space. And, I just kind of dedicated myself to like hiding in my backyard every day between training and work to try to figure out how to shoot a bow, which involved a lot of YouTube. It involved recruiting some friends who knew how to hunt, but it was just this like weird experiment literally in my backyard in Louisiana, trying to figure out like, how do I use this equipment to take down an animal that could potentially feed my family? And that went on for about 7 or 8 months before I even ever got the chance to go hunting.
So you essentially just watch YouTube videos and taught yourself via that stuff, kind of like, look, I'm not a golfer. Okay. But there was a hot second where I'm like, maybe I could be a golfer, because I'm like, my particular skill set in life is the grind. If you tell me there's like gold at the end of the rainbow, it just takes 10,000 reps and all 10,000 are going to be hard. I'm like, awesome. This is my pot of gold. Like, I like this. So I started looking at several friends of mine were like, oh, hey, come golfing with me. I'm not a golfer. So I was like, all right, fine. I can't get into golfing predominantly because it just seems like a lot of morning alcoholics getting together to like support each other. And again, if you're a sober, if you're a sober golfer who likes the afternoon, that's fine. But everybody I hung out with wanted to be taking fireball shots at 8 a.m. and like, crashing golf carts. I'm like, this is not my jam. But when I tried in the backyard, it's like, oh, I don't know anything about technique. Maybe I should start watching YouTube videos. And then I realized it was like, once you go down this path, it's all over.
You never come back.
That was sufficient for you though, in the hunting world.
It was sufficient to get started.
Gotcha.
Hindsight's always 2020. If I had to do it over, I'd say I'd try to find a mentor. Like anything else, like if you wanted to get your white belt or a blue belt online. Like when the Gracie School thing came out a long time ago, when you heard about people getting blue, like it's similar to that. Like it might give you a base, like you might know what guard is, guard retention.
You'll get vocabulary down.
Right. And I
Not
would,
the Japanese vocabulary.
no, God, no. Unless you do 10 planet online. Nonetheless, like it can give you a base, but you can never replace that with hands-on training, like going into a gym, working with a coach. And it's the same thing with hunting. It's the same thing with trapping. If you have that access, take it. If you have somebody who's done it before and you can go under their wing, do it. I did not have that. Just where we were at, isolated kind of in Louisiana, the people that I knew who hunted were 800 miles away, and, we'd get on phone calls, and it got me out of the gate. But I also know well enough, just through doing sports my whole life and trying new things, like that can only take me so far. And I knew that. So I kind of went to those limits as quick as I could. And then like, okay, well now I got to figure out how to actually do this thing and, get boots on the ground essentially.
Sure. So what did you do? Did you find like a hunting group?
A janky ass outfitter in Arkansas to go pig hunting. Still questioning whether it was actually legal or not. So again, this kind of goes to hunting, trapping and all. Like if you've never done it, the rules, the laws, the regulations can actually be quite daunting. I've yet to see a fish and game website that's like modern, that's not run by some, intern in a closet.
Right.
And so finding out the rules online, it's not as easy as it seems. So what I would do is I was like, well, I have some means, so I'm going to look up an outfitter. And I found an outfitter in Arkansas that I called, and he's like, hey, just come out to my farm. We'll, let you bow hunt some pigs. And he's like, $200. I'm like, oh, that sounds like a deal. And I'm like, do I need a license or anything? He's like, just show up. I was like, well, I'm going to take this guy at his word.
If I may, real fast, I went hog hunting in Georgia for a buddy's bachelor party. And we did get hunting licenses online. Fine, no problem. Go out and meet this dude on his property. We get in his A-Team van, which has a joystick in the van and an LED screen, and there was a camera on top that responded to the joystick. So we're riding the back of this van with a bunch of ARs on the back doors, just with the joystick at night. And he's like, just remember, guys, if you hear a dink when you fire your rifle, you own that bullet. You probably just hit some farm equipment, and that's your bullet. And we're like, okay. And the second we leave, we're like, I don't know if that would have held up in court. Like, here's a dude who handed us these rifles, just said, start firing, and then said, if we cause any damage, it's 100% on us. I'm like, I'm pretty sure you bought me that bullet. I don't know. I don't know what the legality is in Georgia, but yeah, it was a little sketch.
Yeah. And similar, right? And, mind you, I showed up to this thing and I had a buddy who was also a brand new hunter. So this was our first legitimate hunt ever. Like we had, practice. By this point, we probably shot thousands of arrows through our bows. We were dialed in. I could hit anything within 20 yards as long as it was straight in front of me. And I was confident of that. Yeah. So we get out here and we meet this guy, and super nice, but as backwoods as you would imagine a guy just over the border of Arkansas from Louisiana would be. And next morning we wake up 4 a.m., balls cold, hop on the back of an ATV. I'm holding him like, he's like I'm his girlfriend around his waist, like I don't know where we're going. And he just hucks me out in the woods, and he said, okay, it's still dark, can't see anything. He's like, 15 yards that way is a corn feeder. Here's a tree stand. Mind you, I've never been in a tree stand before. And he says, I'll pick you up at 7 p.m., or whatever time it was.
Here's some jerky.
Yeah, pretty much. And I was like, well, okay. Like this is hunting now. So, I crawl 30 feet up in this tree, never been in a tree stand. There's no safety rope, no nothing. It's cold. And, when you're preparing to go for a hunt, you imagine everything going just like you would imagine it, right? Like the perfect scenario. I had played out 1,000 times in my head, this pig's walking out, perfect 15-yard broadside shot, ready to go. Didn't think about practicing drawing while I was up in this tree without a tether. And what happened was I sat for the next 8.5 hours in that tree, and the thing that I never thought would happen happened, which was absolutely nothing. Just squirrels. And, I sat there quiet because I was prepared. I was like, it was just going to be 5 more minutes from now. And, that's the reality of hunting. It was the most boring day of my life. I got out of the tree. My back was cramped, like late at night. Went and met up with my buddy who was on another tree stand. He's like, I didn't see anything either. And we did that for 2 days straight and saw nothing and then went home. That was my first hunting experience.
If I may ask, how much did this cost you?
$200.
Okay.
It was not breaking the bank. We're not talking elk hunting and
yeah. Okay. So you paid $100 a day to sit up in a tree stand and count squirrels. Yep. Awesome. Didn't try to shoot the squirrels. That's fine. Maybe
it did not it crossed my mind several times, especially the second day in the afternoon. You know, it definitely crossed my mind to send an arrow.
Man, sounds like that guy made an easy 200 that day.
I think so. He made us a nice pork tenderloin dinner though, so maybe he probably walked out with $180 profit. So.
Probably store-bought too.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so he knows there aren't even pigs. The tree stand and the feeder is just for show.
Just decoy.
Son of a bitch. Let's call this guy right now.
You gotta find him.
Yeah, so you get skunked. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I was talking to somebody today about the nature of entrepreneurship and the difficulty that comes along with it. And most people think things are difficult. Like if you tell me, hey, Matt, it's really hard to get good at, bow hunting. It's really hard to get good at using a bow. How about that? All right. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I understand hard. I understand jujitsu hard. I understand work hard, but there's an aspect of that leads to it is hard, but you will get up the stadium steps and then you'll be at the top. And there's an assured outcome that's like, okay, you've gotten better at shooting the bow. You've gotten better at jujitsu. You ran a bunch of stadiums and you made it through this. But entrepreneurship, which we're talking about today, entrepreneurship is hard in a different way because you don't know if it's even going to work. Like there's no assured outcome. You're like, oh no, it's going to be difficult, but you're going to question whether or not you're going to have an existential crisis through this process. And hunting can be the same thing, right? Fishing can be the same thing where you're like, look, it was hard even to acquire the skill set, but then whether or not there's any even desirable outcome at the end of this is totally to be determined.
100%. And the entrepreneurship thing, I don't know if it's a certain type of person, but I've started 2 companies. One failed miserably. It was $1 billion idea turned into a negative $10,000 idea real quick.
There we go.
And then I had one company that exited. I have that. I think there's certain people who just have that aptitude to just grind, like no matter the outcome. Sure. And I think even going into hunting, I knew there was a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Like I knew inherently I was going to harvest an animal at some point. So like getting deterred from that first experience, like it was not that big a deal for me. It sucked. I was expecting to get an animal and I was going to go home, high five my wife and be like, look, I can provide. Instead, I had to go with my tail tucked like, yeah, so I invested all this money the past 11 months and finally got an opportunity and I failed. But I'm just so used to failing.
Right.
It's no factor for me.
Right.
So there was, for me, it actually empowered me to say, okay, well, what's the next thing? How can I keep going forward? Because it kind of scratched an itch. Like, I don't know if there were actually pigs out there, but like I knew there were animals, and being outside, sitting in the woods with a bow, knowing I could actually shoot the thing gave me enough of an itch to be like, okay, keep going.
Right. Right. It's kind of like in jiu-jitsu. I have a good friend, Max, who lives in North Carolina. He's a white belt. And again, we were rowers and great friends since college on. And he's getting to that point where he's getting frustrated that maybe he's not seeing, quote unquote progress, not subbing the right people that he wants. And again, he's just white belt. He's getting there though. And I appreciate it because it's like, listen, just enjoy the process. And if you're only here for very specific success, you're never going to make it. Yeah. Like you have to keep going out there, enjoying the process, even if it doesn't turn out the way you want. Because if you don't, then you're never, and again, like your experience, like, was it even in quote unquote quantitative failure from not harvesting an animal, was it tolerable enough? Like, did you enjoy the experience enough, even you'd keep doing it even if it didn't work out?
I think I just like type 2 fun.
Type 2. It's always fun after.
Yeah, it's honestly, it sucked. Like, it was my first experience, and any hunter will know this, or anybody who spends a lot of time outdoors. Like, there's a spectrum you go through every single day, whether it's backcountry hunting, whitetail hunting. Like, I was like jackhammer freezing in the tree those first few hours, right before sunlight. And then I'm sitting stark still in a tree for the next 7 hours, going through cramps and stuff, not seeing anything, and then freezing again at the end of the day. It sucked. There was no redeeming factor about the experience other than it was a manifestation of what I had wanted to do for the past 11 months. which was have the opportunity to go hunting, which is something I had never done in my entire life. That was literally the only redeeming factor.
So you get home, you suck at life. You have to admit to the ex-wife, the wife at the time, I didn't get anything, but I think I'm in. What then?
Then I jumped in with 2 feet. You know, I think it's like anything else. Like sometimes you get in, you dabble as a white belt, and then like your friend, you kind of get to this point where you can either say, all right, what is it? Taking the red pill, Matrix.
Yeah, red pill.
Yeah.
Did you know they made another Matrix movie? The
new
Matrix Resurrection or something?
No.
Yeah, I just watched it the other day. It was from like 2 years. It was 21 or 22 or something. It
Something
was
to write home about?
terrible.
Oh.
It was not terrible like the second or third Matrix, which were terrible, but terrible as in like, oh my God, you actually just killed the series. Like, oh, sweet Lord, it was not great.
You got to put a nail in it somehow.
Dude, they did. Hey, look, if Keanu Reeves wanted to kill that fame and fortune, he did it. At least John Wick, they made like 5 John Wicks. They were all just Keanu Reeves doing, killing people the whole time. I watched them all. I was like, all right, great. You did it.
Say, protect your dog, man.
Yeah. Oh, God. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah. So then I actually recruited people I knew. I was like, okay, I want to do this now. So ex-wife's father, my father-in-law, super nice guy. I had been scared to call him because, he'd always been hunting since I had been married to my ex-wife. And, I just kind of didn't turn my nose up to it, but I just never really interacted with him on it.
Sure.
And he's very passionate about it, like the scientific, like food plots, white-tailed deer, all that jazz. Right. So I was scared to ask him to go hunting. But then when I finally did, it was like Pandora's box opened up. His eyes lit up. He's like, come to Tennessee right now. He's sending me like what would turn out to be something similar to OnX, which is a mapping software. He's like sending me pins for his tree stands. He's like, this deer, I got an actual picture of a deer on a trail cam. He's like, this deer comes in at this time, like just down like scientific stuff. I was like, whoa, like I had no idea this was like it. So fast forward, went there with a buddy of mine, the same guy that we went hog hunting with. And we went there one weekend and he was the one, we were both in a tree stand and he shot a doe at 30 yards. And that was the first animal he or I ever harvested. And then it turned into like a weekend at Bernie's where we tried to figure out how to get this animal out of the woods into a processor.
So how did you get it out?
Literally like weekend at Bernie's. It was
just,
well, it was what's funny about it. And I talk about this in the book, actually. It's, it's a good plan until you get punched in the mouth.
Sure.
So we had every plan. Like I knew I wanted to learn how to process an animal by myself, but I was like, we'll just push that one off. Like, let's get to harvesting an animal first. And, we'll start by killing an animal, taking it to a processor, letting them do the dirty work. And then next one, maybe I'll learn how to field dress it and do this stuff. The universe had a different plan for us that day. In so much that we got the animal down. We weren't going to field dress it. So it's not a huge deer, but it's like 100 pounds undressed. It's in the middle of the woods, not far from the road, but we didn't know how to dress it, actually take the skin off, quarter it up so you can take it out in manageable loads. But we still had to get it to the truck to get it to the processor. So we do this process of literally like, waddling, like he's carrying the 2 front legs, I'm carrying the 2 back legs, we're going like a mile and, it's hot. So we're sweating and we're like, man, this is going to take forever. And then we start dragging it and we're like, is that going to ruin the meat? We're just asking ourselves all these dumb questions we just don't have an answer to. So we get it as far as we can until we can back the truck in. We get the deer in the truck. We're like, whew, high-fiving all around. Like, we did it, buddy. What we didn't take into account was that it was Sunday in Middle Tennessee and the processor was closed.
Oh, no.
So we drive the 30 minutes to the processor. And they have a cooler where you could drop the deer off, but you have to have it field dressed, gutted, all the guts, everything out of it.
I was going to say, did you leave all of that in it?
Oh, yeah. We had no idea what we were doing, man.
Because you've got to get that stuff out like immediately, right?
Yes. So it's hot. So we shot it in the morning.
Sure.
Took us an hour to get it to the truck, 30 minutes to drive there to have that, oh shit, realization like, we're backed up against the corner. We're gonna have to do this. So we drive the 30 minutes back to my father-in-law's house and I'm banking on him being there. I'm like, okay, father-in-law will just take the reins. He'll show us.
Take care of it. Yeah.
He's at church. So I'm like, crap. Okay. And at this point, like you can see the deer rigor mortis is set in and you can start to see the bloat on the belly. And we're like, we did not just harvest this deer to lose the meat, because the whole point is we wanted the meat, right? That was what got us in the.
Let me ask you something. You're in an emergency, okay? You're in the situation. My instinct is, look, slice it, reach up, slice the esophagus, pull everything down, cut the ass, dump it out, hose it out, call it a day. Am I way off?
No, I mean, that's essentially what happened, but you are way further down the learning curve than this guy and I were this first time we took this deer. So good for you.
Balloon in the back.
Yeah. And, it's getting a warm day. It's like a warm November day in Tennessee. So we pull it out of the truck and it's just sitting in my ex-in-law's yard. And we're looking at each other and he just pulls out his Benchmade knife and like pops it open. No, we're going to do it surgically. And plus we need some guidance. So we end up propping our iPhone like between the rigor mortis back legs. And we're like looking through YouTube videos. But what was funny is each one we went to, this shows how like green we were. It's like, well, it's just a good old boy. He's like, well, you're going to start here at the butthole and you're going to, cut around it. And we're like, that can't be right. So the next video, and it's like, hey, you got to start here. And then so like 4 videos in, we're like, well, I guess we're starting at the butthole. And so we're sitting there looking like freaking frack and, not sharp knives. He's got a Benchmade, but I'm sure it's been dulled. So we're like, it's brutal. And, I detailed this one in the book because it is funny, but we, finally get it open and it's like diving into tomato soup and we're finally trying to feel around for the esophagus. We're like really crappy med students, I'm like, I think this is esophagus. I need a second opinion. And, an hour later we do get all of it out, hose it out, but yeah, and it was
man. So my instincts were good.
Your instincts were good. You're spot on. So you get that deer. You know what to do if it starts to bloat.
My dad just moved down from Alaska, but he was living up in Anchorage for about 25 years, from when I was 15 until about 40, and he would go caribou hunting and whatnot. And man, he said it was so cold up there. Exact opposite of warm. It was so cold. He said he could take off his gloves, but you really only had like 30 seconds, and you had a decision to make once you realized your hands were going. He's like, you can either put your bloody, nasty hands back in the gloves and kind of do this for a couple minutes, or you just bury them in the innards. And he's like, you just wait for them.
It's like Star Wars,
Yeah. Oh my God. It's the tauntaun right there. Slice the guts open.
Maybe that's where you picked up that intuition.
Yeah. I believe he told me about harvesting one and just, yeah, I mean, probably, because he's like, esophagus, blah, blah. Yeah. Anyway, it's kind of pissed me off too, because he moved to Alaska when I was 15. I was still living in Concord. And then he went up to Alaska and did all these baller things like hunting bears and caribou and everything. I never got to do any of that stuff with him. I'm like, you left me down in the crappy concrete jungle. You're living in Alaska going hunting and like,
good luck, son.
Yeah, right. And then I have to go to Berkeley. Blah. Anyway, let's keep going. Don't hold that against me. I just went to the best school I got into. That was it.
Hey, man. I mean, the Haas school, man, go for it.
Yeah,
I went to Johns Hopkins, so I can't say anything.
Look at you.
I know.
Look at you. That's a private school, bro.
I know.
You're so soft.
I know.
It's all right. Keep going.
Have you seen my hands?
Oh my God. So you get this one hosed out. You save the meat, I presume.
Yep.
You save the experience, but you have an actual experience now.
Yep.
Which is, hey, it was ugly, it was nasty, but like we did it.
Mm-hmm. And so net is, he went back, my buddy, to Louisiana, and I still had a tag to fill. So I went back every weekend. So 8-hour drive from Baton Rouge up to Middle Tennessee. And eventually I ended up connecting solo on a buck. Had more confidence to do the gutting this time. Like I knew what I was going to have to do. It's like anything, reps.
Yeah, right.
You get through it. And so I have that animal. And then that is like the peak of my experience. Like I have harvested an animal. It has turned into meat in my freezer. And then I go through a divorce.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, man, that's rough.
It is. But, amicable as it could be.
Any kids?
No kids. Very lucky at the time. No kids. It was about as easy as a split as you could have it, for being unexpected. But
she didn't like your hunting habits. Huh?
She didn't like that I was sucked so much. So I don't blame her. Yeah. She's like, I need a man that provides, and this does not look like you're on a good trajectory.
Oh my God. So you found this thing that you really liked.
Yeah.
And you started engaging in it. Then life gets derailed. So there are really only one of two options. as again, you see in the jiu-jitsu community.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody either goes off the rails, throws caution to the wind, starts horning up, drinking everything, or they find that thing that they're kind of like, this could be my next thing.
Yep.
This could be my life. I have a very dear friend who did just that. And he went through a not great divorce, had 3 kids, and he found jiu-jitsu and he didn't go on a date for like 3 or 4 years. He just trained every single night. He lost like 25 pounds. He's a black belt now. He went from white to black. And so I presume you did the latter.
Yes.
All right.
And, the year before, my ex-wife and I, we'd always done, we were dinks, dual income, no kids.
Yeah, there you go.
So we would go on our vacations every year. It was usually overseas, Turkey, wherever. And that year that this ended up happening, and the year that I was hunting, like, I had been so enamored with hunting and YouTube videos at the time. Like, we never explored anything in the West. I had never been west of the Rockies outside of like going to San Francisco for work and stuff like that, but never been in the Rockies. So I was like, let's go to Idaho. So we actually had flown up the May before that November hunt where I harvested that deer, just to go to Stanley. So we flew into Boise. It's the first time I'd ever been to Boise. I'm like, man, this is a pretty clean city compared to like Louisiana.
Yeah, you see the warthogs on the runway and stuff.
Yeah.
You're like, there's something different here.
Yeah, there's something different. And we drove up to Stanley, and on that Highway 21 route, or we might have gone up through Banks and Lowman on the way up. I can't remember. But either way, like driving along the river, there was like a bald eagle flying right beside us, and I could hear the Star Spangled Banner. I saw antelope for the first time, elk, mule deer within a 60-mile drive. And then we got up to Stanley, and we went on a hike, and we saw a wolf on that hike. It was insane. It was like everything was speaking to me. And I remember telling my ex-wife when we were there, I'm like, we're moving here. Like, we are moving here. And she was with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. She's like, yeah, maybe when I retire in, 17 years, whatever. I'm like, well, then we're buying a cabin. We're going to vacation here. I'm like, I am in this state. Like, there was something called me, especially to the Sawtooth and specifically, which is where I'm still living today. And then fast forward, 6 months later, divorce happens, and I'm stuck at this crossroads, and I'm like, where am I going to go? So I packed my little bow. I packed my cooler full of deer meat that I had just gotten processed, and I pointed my car north and landed in Boise. It's like 2019. Yeah.
So what are you doing at this time? Because professionally, because obviously you armed services, the whole thing, but what are you doing at that point?
I have been a professional in artificial intelligence for the last 12 years.
Okay.
Yeah. So AI, worked for I was with Capital One at the time. Gotcha. So building the backend infrastructure for predictive models, for different type of credit offerings, things like that.
Did they see the 7% interest coming in 2023, 2022? So.
Not a lot of home loans going through there, but credit card interest has always been way higher.
This is always the question I have. It's like, how everybody knew that interest rates were going to adjust eventually, but are they staying up here? Are they coming back down? And I have a good friend, Chris Mitchell, who's in the Bauscher real estate team. And I was talking to her just yesterday. She said, look, I think they're here to stay. Like, I think maybe they'll drop into 5s at some point.
That's what somebody else told me.
I think you're going to have to accept like 6 and 7% for the foreseeable future, and not like 12 months or 20, like for the next 10 years, we're going to float in this range. And then other people are like, there's no way. Because, like 90% of the home loans in the country are at 3%, and people will just not move, which means we're going to grind the actual movement relocation down to like nothing.
Yep. Yeah, that's scary. I wish I had a better answer for you.
Yeah, I wish you did too.
I don't.
No sweat. So you move up here, you're working in AI.
I've always been remote, since I've been back, it was remote work for forever. Right. So I come here, I got a month-to-month rental downtown Boise. This is a couple months before the pandemic hits. And, I was training with Brad when he had his place downtown, Abide Jiu-Jitsu. But in that time, I immediately started looking for properties. So I went over and looked in the Lemhi area, and I put in an offer on a house that actually had the placard where Lewis and Clark first unfurled the flag west of the Rockies. Got outbid on that one. Surprise, surprise. But started looking all around, was up near McCall, was up in Sandpoint, middle of the state. And eventually I found Atlanta, Idaho, and there was one cabin that was available. And, I made the drive out there, which is a fun drive when there's still snow on the ground, when you're not used to driving in snow, when you probably need chains and you don't have it. Got out there, looked at the cabin, and I was done. I was sold. It was, as close to a intuitive feeling, like this was like the calling, like this is what I was meant for. This is for me. The opportunity's here. The price is right. And just jumped in.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you're living out there and you immediately start setting up like your own tree stands. I mean, how?
No. So again, like YouTube.
Sure. Right on the butthole. Just
right on the butthole, man. That should be my tagline. Nonetheless, I'd always had big game on my mind, right? It's like this graduation. We started with pigs, unsuccessful. I shot a deer. That's amazing. I'm living out west now, like elk and mule deer. And that was all that was on my mind. So I was just out shooting my bow. I had a range in the backyard of the cabin. I'm shooting arrows all day. I'm studying. I'm, figuring out where I'm going to elk hunt. I ended up going with an outfitter the first year I did, just to kind of beat down the learning curve, and just doing all these things. And, that was great. And I still love big game hunting, but in that time that I was just practicing, when I was moved up there, I'm solo, getting to live out this kind of mountain man, lifestyle. Like I'm just in the middle of nowhere. There's no neighbors. I can brood and
brood
all these different things that were hitting me after this divorce. And I was doing it, but then I was starting to talk to old timers. There's 37 people who live up there year round. And, it was out of hunting season. They're like, well, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm working out. I'm shooting my bow, I'm doing my Cam Hanes lift, run, shoot kind of thing. And
did you have a full beard at the time? Tell me you were growing it all out.
I mean, I had one down to here.
Yes.
So, I mean, I was full
You're
on,
up there brooding,
just growing my
doing
beard,
push-ups and shooting your bow.
Yep.
God bless it.
I know. So I just run around like a 6-pack, and there's like the median age up there is like 76. They're like, who is this guy? But, nonetheless, one of them started talking to me. He's like, well, what are you doing for hunting? I'm like, well, I'm doing all these things. Like, that's great. Can't beat just going out there and doing it. I'm like, yeah. And then we're going to get there in hunting season. He's like, well, have you ever thought about trapping? He's like, the best way to get better at hunting and something you can do year round is trapping. And to be honest, outside of seeing trapping in movies that I'd liked or watched recently, like Jeremiah Johnson or, Call of the Wild as a kid, like my knowledge of trapping was that caricature that most people have of this metal jaw with teeth on it that clamps on an animal, and I thought was probably inhumane. So I was like, no, I haven't thought about trapping. He's like, why not? And of course, I had no valid reason other than saying like, well, isn't that kind of a mean thing to do? And he's like, all right, moron, like, let me show you. And that was like when Pandora's box of trapping got open to me while I was still pursuing this, new passion of figuring out big game hunting.
Okay, don't stop. I am all
You're in. You're locked in.
I am locked in. So he's like, let me help you. And so he takes you out to like, does he have active trap lines or something?
No. So he used to. He had used to have trap lines.
I'm sorry. Do you need a break? I'm just enthralled in the story.
No. I'm good to go. I just wanted to
just keep going. I have no. Besides having the realization that the bearded dude gif that's like, was from Jeremiah Johnson, right? The one where it zooms in and gives like the slight nod.
Yep.
And then you realize like how brooding and crazy that guy was. And just, yeah.
So I was,
you were that guy.
I was the caricature, man.
Yeah.
Young, just pissed off at the world, like go to the woods. And this guy didn't have an active trap line, but he's like, you need to look at trapping. And he kind of gave me some guidance. And of course, what I do, I went back to YouTube. I was like, what is this trapping? And so I kind of realized from a conservation standpoint, from an ability to just be out in the woods more pursuing animals, I'm like, this has some merit.
Right.
And the biggest thing to me was realizing that the traps that you use today, it's first and foremost a very regulated activity. The seasons are tight, but there's a lot that you can do year round, especially in Idaho, which is nice. And it's ethical. And we can go through all the different trap types, but nonetheless, like, they're very safe to use. There's no teeth on them like you would imagine, or, they used to show in cartoons.
Right.
And so
because teeth on a trap is way worse than, I don't know, a bullet in the fucking head.
Right.
Yeah. Like, or an arrow.
Pick your poison, right?
Right. Like at some point you're just kind of like, hey, look, I'm a buy a chicken from the store that somebody raised and killed. or I'm going to go kill something in the woods.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want anything to suffer. Yeah. Like maybe teeth where the animal's stuck for 24 hours is not the best, but like they're meeting an end one way or another.
They are. And you know, arguably that's a much better end than being eaten alive. Again, probably butthole first by another big predator.
Right.
There's just a constant theme through this, but nonetheless, I went and
that's the thing though with coyotes, isn't it?
it is.
Yeah.
And I think bears too. Like,
Yeah.
that's my biggest fear is getting pinned down by a grizzly bear and going out that way.
I thought they go for like shoulders and neck.
I'm
I'm trying to get a guy from Fish and Game to come in and do an episode on necropsy to really help. Because when people are like, how do you know if something was killed by a bear or a mountain lion or a wolf or just died on its own? Because all of those things can be responsible for big game death, right? Yeah. And there are so many. There's a famous picture from, I think, 2016 where you have a bunch of mule deer, and it's like 16 mule deer. And at the end of winter, they're lying in the snow, and the sentiment around it is, hey, these wolves just sport killed all these mule deer. And I asked a couple people about that. Like, we know exactly the image you're talking about. That was at the end of a very, very hard winter. And yes, if you went out there and there were those mule deer and you started chasing them around, being nice and fat and caffeinated, they would have keeled over with you chasing them. If you actually cracked open their bones and looked at their bone, there would have been no fat left. Like, these animals were at the end of their lives. And that really got me interested in, okay, how are we communicating with the average person who's concerned about this, and let alone legislators who make laws about it? How are we communicating the nuances of how people make their determinations in, say, Fish and Game, or especially when you're doing, depredation cases and things like that? It's like, hey, I don't want to pay you the money for this dead animal because it wasn't killed by what you say it was. It's like, well, how do you know?
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's a complex question.
Well, I mean, even the FBI with humans struggles with that, right?
Right.
Necropsy from any species, human, animal, it's difficult.
Right.
And
under one of the first things, a fellow by the name of Charlie Justice, who used to work for Fish and Game, came in and did an episode. He's awesome because he was talking about like reptiles, and there's apparently like a snake king in Boise who like trades, poisonous snakes that he catches, and it doesn't matter. But the point is that he was telling me off air, he's like, well, I mean, the first thing you got to do is just figure out if the animal started eating away at the carcass before or after the heart stopped. Like, wait, how the hell would you do that? He's like, well, is there blood all around? Like, is the bruising? Yeah, it's just, again, detailed stuff. But animals die for a myriad of reasons.
Yeah. And when trapping opened up to me, I was like, okay, well, I can be out in the woods. Maybe I can, again, my whole thing, just like jujitsu or anything else, was to beat down that learning curve.
Sure.
I killed a deer at that point. I thought I was hot stuff. I knew I was going to be doing elk hunting, all this. I'm like, well, I can start trapping. So shout out to Rocky Mountain Fireworks and Fur. If you've ever been out there, it's in Caldwell. If you want fireworks and trap supplies, one-stop shop.
Especially this time of year.
Yeah, really. But it is actually amazing. They have a really crazy selection of tan furs and trapping equipment. So I found that online. I'm like, there's no way there's an actual like fireworks and trapping supply place down in Caldwell, Idaho. So when I went down to town one time, I'm like, I got to see if this is just like a fake website, maybe, like, I don't know. And you go and it looks like a fireworks store on the side of the highway, bright colors. And I go in and there's this lovely lady and I'm like, I'm here for trapping stuff. And it was like a weird drug deal. She's like, oh, you're a trap guy? I'm like, I think so.
I'd like to be.
Yeah. And she's like, hold on. And she like disappeared behind the desk and there's fireworks all around me. And she like does this little number. She takes me outside and there's a Connex on the back of the building that's lock and key. And she's like, okay, we're going to go to the trap side. And she goes over and she unlocks this Connex and she opens the door and the smell hits you first. You think about just lures like animal urines, all sorts of different stuff to get animals coming in for trapping, and like it hits you. And I'm like, okay, I'm in the trap world now. And you walk into this Connex and it's just lined with equipment, traps, skinning equipment, knives, rubber glue. It's like Dexter's Warehouse.
Yeah.
And, I'm like, okay, this is it. And what was funny is I had no idea what I was doing still at this point. I'm like, I think I'd like to catch some fox because that was a year-round opportunity. And this lovely old lady, I mean, not old, I mean, she's probably in her 60s. And she's like, oh, honey. She's like, I got you.
I got you.
So she set me up with these little footholds, and she was like educating me and telling me stuff that I'd read online. I'm like, oh, this is what that was. And she's like, you need to dip them. You need to do this. And I was the easiest guy to make a sale to. So $500 later, I'm walking out there with like traps, dye, lures, all sorts of stuff. I'm like, oh, I'm going to get a fox. And, fast forward to going back up, and there were foxes all around my cabin. Like I saw them. They'd come up to my door. I'm like, oh, I got you.
I got you.
I got you.
If only I had a trap under my doormat, I would have got you.
100%. But then what I learned very quickly, like the hunting, anything else, like there is an art to it. What I found out is that canines, even a fox, are way smarter than I am. Like if you were to line up like intelligence from canines to human, at that point, I was well behind the dumbest canine. And it was an interesting pitching of wits, because what happened is for the next month, I was battling a fox with a foothold in, several acres of land behind my house. And I'd go out and be like, okay, well, something didn't work. This canine dug up my trap that I'd set, peed on it, and literally, and then would walk away. And I'd go out the next day and be like, how did he know? Then I'd YouTube and I'd be like, got to descent everything. I'd go through this process of descenting, and I'd look at other types of ways to set your trap. And then same thing, we dug up, peed on. And this went on for a month until like the day that it happened. And I remembered I walked over this hill and I just heard that chain rattling for the first time. And I was like, I've never been more excited. Like shooting a deer for the first time was amazing after putting all that effort in. But a month of just dedicated back and forth with a canine that was way smarter than me, getting them to step in a 1 foot square area in a huge expanse of wilderness was like the best feeling I've ever had of success, of like being able to be, okay, I could provide now. I could figure this thing out.
God, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That sounds great. So you start trapping then. You got first off, did you eat the fox?
No, but you skinned it. And, the predator thing, like I'll eat my bear. I've tried some otter. And we eat the beaver. The fox I've tried, not a fan. But I use it in other baits and other lures. Sure. So it gets used essentially is what it comes down to. But yeah, I mean, trapping, what was great about it is going back to like not knowing how to quarter a deer. Yeah. It's reps. You can do fur bearing animals in most states for a lot of the year, and you get time under the knife. So you figure out how to skin them. You figure out the anatomy of these animals, which is similar in a lot of different ways across different species. And it really does beat down the learning curve of like understanding tracks, understanding animal behavior, getting the opportunity to have takes and do knife work throughout the whole year, which by the time the next big game season came around, like I had so much confidence in the ability to skin, quarter, dismantle a larger game animal that I was going to consume for sustenance.
Man, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And, Randy Newberg, I had him on my podcast, and he said it really well because he's been a lifelong trapper and he's a famous hunter. And he's like, you get me within 300 yards of an elk with my modern rifle, like there's a very high likelihood that elk is going to, get taken that day. You get an animal within 2 yards of my trap, and I still have a lot of work to do. God, so it just kind of gives that perspective of like the amount of time and energy that goes into trapping, versus hunting in a lot of instances.
Do you think that there's an aspect of tolerance for complexity that you have that draws you towards trapping? Because, if it's just hunting, it's like, and again, I'm not putting anything down against hunting, but you're saying, hey, look, with your right equipment, a buddy of mine, Seth Simpson, who goes hound hunting and stuff, he talks about how he's actually made it harder and harder and harder for himself because it got so easy when he was hunting, say, coyotes with a rifle. He's like, it's not even fun anymore. Like I got to have, my dog's got to go out and I got to, he has different jag hounds and all kinds of different things. Do you think it's similar with trapping in that it's like infinitely complex and you're never going to get to the point where you're like, okay, this is the easy button. Like if somebody wants to go out and shoot an elk with a high power rifle, 300 yards, they're like, hey, I got it. There's no high powered rifle for trapping. Like there's no easy button ever.
Yeah. I think so. I don't think it was on purpose. I think maybe that old timer, that was probably his trick to me of like being the new guy. Like, let me get this guy into trapping and make him miserable for the rest of his life. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's that complexity and it has taken over my passion area. Like I still go out big game hunting every year. We just went bear hunting and it was a blast, but trapping now is still like my passion. Like that is where I put the majority of my effort. And it probably is because of that, the difficulty level gets ratcheted up a little bit, and it's just fun.
Yeah. So is it just foxes that you trapped, or did you like move on to try and trap wolves?
Yeah. I graduated up the chain, So, started with fox, and truly my passion. Like if you had to say, Zach, what animal would you want to trap for the rest of your life? It would be beaver and otter. Like, I'm not a fisherman. I've been avoiding that, like the plague. I feel like it's going to be like fentanyl. It's just going to take over. I don't want to hit. But I love the river. Yeah. So the ability in the winter to like strap on, waders, get out in the water with snow around when you hear the water, and, it's just quiet, and you're just figuring out where beaver and otters are swimming. Like, that's the coolest thing in the world. That's what I'd do for the rest of my life. But I did graduate up the canine ladder too, from fox to coyotes to wolves. And where I said I was outsmarted by fox in the beginning, I met the same thing with all the canines, coyotes being significantly more intelligent than foxes. And then, of course, wolves being kind of the penultimate challenge from a trapping perspective. I mean, they are just the smartest animals you can imagine. Again, where I've had wolves go up to my traps, you see their paw prints in the snow, make a 45-degree turn, walk right around, pee on it.
Gosh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, you sent me those pictures too with the trail cams and I was walking around. How close were they to your traps there?
No traps on the ground then. Those were
just cams.
Yeah, just on cams. But from where I would be trapping and have trapped, 400 meters. And that's the problem with wolf trapping from a difficulty standpoint, is these wolves have such a wide range, right? I think on average, like 100-mile radius they'll go in like a 30-day period. And, they're pretty migratory in that regard. Like, they're going around. So like if you go and you see a wolf on your trail cam, like I saw, if I went and put steel on the ground right where I knew they were, the likelihood of them coming back in that area again within the next 30 days is pretty low. So it's also a patience game. And that's one thing that's really, a trapper told me, you never, pull steel, your traps off the ground to go put them somewhere else. Like, once they're on there, they're dedicated, which means you have to be dedicated for a month, 2 months. So some of the best wolf trappers are guys that can actually dedicate the time to go and do their trap checks, in that legal window of, 72 hours, oftentimes more, to go check and see if they have something. But you need to have that steel on the ground for sometimes months on end before you connect. And I realized my first seasons is I wasn't patient enough. I'd put steel on the ground, 12 days would be like go by. I'd be like, oh man, I got to pull that. Like, I saw wolf tracks over here. So I go and pull. And then of course, if I left a trail cam there, then the wolf would come back in like on day 14 and I'd be like, oh, why'd I do that? But just another learning experience over years.
So going through this evolution of, hey, look, I'm going to start catching my own food. I'm going to learn these really, really complex means of harvesting animals. You're now, well, I mean, obviously shave the beard at some point, but just like kind of bearded and brooding. Did that pull you out of your brooding phase? And that's assuming that you are out of it, but
I'm way out of it.
I just see so much of people that I talk to that talk about how jiu-jitsu saved their lives. Very rarely are they talking about how they literally had to like fight off an attacker with jiu-jitsu. And it's far more of, it brought me back to who I am, or it like helped me engage and get away from this just dynamic, this spiral that I was in. And it sounds like to you, going through this really traumatic, not super traumatic, but it's not great to get divorced. You probably did not get married with the intention of getting divorced, right? Yep. So going through this process and then finding this piece to kind of like bring you back to the world that you could exist happily into. Is that how trapping fit in with you?
It definitely is a big component of that. I mean, I'd be a liar if I said that the other big component is I met my current wife in that time frame too. And that definitely helped because she's just a G. And now we have 3 kids. It would bang, bang, bang. Like, it was not a long, how do you call it? Mourning period for me. Like,
wait, how do you have 3? Didn't you get divorced in like 2018, 19?
I'm telling you, man, we didn't waste any time.
You met your new wife and then had 3 children. Any of them twins?
Nope.
Oh my gosh, man. God, are you Irish? You're not Mexican. I know that.
Yeah, I know. My wife's Eastern European, so also very fertile.
Awesome. Wow.
Well, as we found out. But yeah, like it was very fast. But like this morning period, like I was so taken by just not just trapping. Like it was the hunting, being outdoors.
It's a lifestyle.
Yeah, it is. And like getting to actually live it out. And then I met my current wife kind of relatively soon in that process. And she was a, Idaho mountain girl, like she was at home there. So it just fit so well together. And she was a person who's just very supportive and, independent in her own right. She was also in her 30s, never married, no kids. So like we both had these independent lives that just seemed to match up so well together. She was supporting me trapping. She wanted to learn these things too. So she's out helping me hoop beaver. So, you find a woman who's willing to, and she didn't grow up hunting or trapping herself, just outdoors a lot, but willing to be like, okay, I guess I'll help you hang this beaver fur up. You keep them. Also being stuck in a cabin in the middle of nowhere, leads to the children being made too.
Indeed. What else we got to do?
Nah, you trap and, make babies, I guess.
So where does that fit into your idea of like modern feralness, right? Because a lot of people view domestication or pairing as kind of like a tapping out from the way we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And man, I feel so bad. I went to pick up pho last night because like we really like pho. And
who doesn't?
Right. And I go there and the place I go,
right on Glenwood and State.
There we go. Right next to Jimmy John's or whatever it is, right? So I go in there and they got that TV that's always playing,
the food stuff.
Yeah, right. And at this particular time, there was a video of them flipping like meatballs on the grill, and just like, and the gal's ringing me up, and she's like 19 or 20, just like minding her own business, trying to ring up some jerk who's picking up a big box of pho. And I was like, so do you guys just play the same reel of food all day? And it's like a fun thing to watch, a little OCD and food. It's like, yeah, or it's Disney movies, right? Like one of the owners, kids comes and works and she really likes Disney. I'm like, oh, Disney, fallen from grace. And she was like, yeah, it's Moana usually. I'm like, oh, I like Moana. I got little kids. She's like, or Frozen, which is, I was like, Frozen's trash. First off, it's the number one and only attempt to popularize a film with a soundtrack that has off-key singing.
I'm tone deaf, so
like, it's terrible. Well, you don't have to avoid being tone deaf to know, like, let it go. Like, it's terrible, right? And she, of course, does the one thing that drives me insane, which is, it was like, yeah, but it's so great because it's the only Disney movie where like the heroine doesn't need a man. And I like a blackout for a second, right? And I can't help it because I so dislike the idea that the way we're supposed to be and honor ourselves to the highest degree is like these loner, independent, like I'm blah, blah, blah. And I think it's lame for to honor women who do that, and I think it's lame to honor men that do that, right? Because I can speak for myself. I was not nearly or ever going to be as hard and as diligent and as responsible and productive as I am now that I have kids. I was never going to be that. There's nothing I could foresee, and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I would have had life experiences that like drew the best out of me. But dude, I cannot foresee something that would have forced me to be the way I am now.
Yeah.
In the absence of finding a partner, having children, and trying to make it happen. Like that, to me, that's like our ultimate natural state. And I think there's a portrayal of men who get, the ferility, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, I'm just going to go be this wild animal. It's like, wild animals pair up and make babies. Like that's what wild animals do.
Well, it's like you read the book or something. I know you haven't, but
you just gave me a copy.
I know.
But I'd like the conversation we have. I'm like, I know we're going to jive on this stuff.
But it's really split into 3 parts. So it's kind of like that fall from grace,
right?
Ego driven, be a mountain man. And the last chapter is community. And that's what surprised me the most. Cause when I left, I was pissed off, grow the beard, screw the world, move to the woods. I can do this on my own. Right. Like I don't need anybody. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. So like, yes, marriage, children, that is the ultimate driver to pull you out of that. But even prior to that, that little community of like 38 people, it's the strangest microcosm, because we have like representation from all elements. Like you have outlaws, you've got gold miners, you've got, just all walks of life. And that community, even like despite the differences in political views, surprisingly, despite the differences in, income, if there's a problem, everybody in that town comes together. Everybody's a volunteer firefighter. Everybody's on the EMS team. Everybody does everything to support each other. You need help, shoveling someone's driveway who can't do it anymore because they're too old. Everybody's out there with no questions asked. Everybody is helping each other and supporting each other. And that's what drew me out. And, my wife and us having kids was like the, topping on that really just kind of put fuel on the fire. But it was community that I was not expecting to gain, especially when I was so frustrated. But that was kind of like the peak of my feralness. It's like, oh, like you can be, quote, feral, and you can learn skills that are applicable, that can help you survive in a situation. But, you're not going to survive without a community, not long at least. And that was kind of my biggest takeaway of the whole experience over those 6 or 7 years.
Right. And like our natural state of existence is not alone.
Yep.
And there have been many cases of individuals that have been recorded very effectively throughout time, where people like try to go back to the Stone Age and then the Bronze Age, and then, like they're living alone, muttering to themselves, and, like somewhere without electricity. That's fine. That's not what you see, right? Like if you go to any hunter-gatherer, last tribes, or even the lost tribes of the Amazon, these are tribes, right? Like humans in their natural, in their feral nature, are community driven.
Yeah. Well, one of you might know him too. His name's Eric Becker. He's a blue belt. Nonetheless, he's a videographer. He's an Emmy-winning filmmaker. And he's a close friend of mine. He ended up getting a place up in Atlanta too, but he just this past year filmed a traditional moose hunt in Norway. And it was female led, but there's this lady who does like Stone Age techniques, but their whole thing is community.
Right.
They're like, you can learn how to like skin a moose with a rock, but to skin a moose with a rock, you need 13 people doing it at the same time. It is all community driven.
Right. There was a story about Clovis people doing a big, it was like a mammoth hunt or something, or mastodons. I can't remember. It was one of the giant elephant things. Yeah. Right. And the story, of course, is from an archaeological dig. And they had figured out that it was a Clovis hunt because there were, I believe, 11 animals involved. One, the cow, then the bull, and then like 9 kids, right? And each of the kids had one arrow stuck in it from atlatl, right? The bull had taken off and had something like 4 stuck in it. Oh, and the mom, the cow, had something like 13 arrowheads in it, because the cow stayed to defend the young, and again, the bull took off. But you realize that the people, the like ancient people who did this, literally had sticks with other sticks attached and like a rock at the end, and they were like 4 feet tall. So you have these little people with zero technology by our terms, right? We could not reproduce these weapons that they use, nor could we reproduce the techniques and communication and effective strategies they used, but they were able to bring down these animals that towered over them like houses, and not just one of them by accident, but like a whole family of them. And just, man, it's amazing what can be done when you effectively work together with a plan. And again, the idea that, hey, look, I'm going to go back to my roots and be like this loner brooding, not saying that that's what you think you were doing, but
that's what I thought I was doing.
Well, okay, there you go. There are these media portrayals of, do you ever see that movie 4 Christmases?
Yes.
Yes. So Vince Vaughn's dad at the end, when he's just sitting on the porch drinking his Coors Light, like all pissed off, all alone, and he only like becomes friends with Vince Vaughn and like shakes him and says Merry Christmas. They go inside when Vince Vaughn tells him that he has chosen this, reject everyone, reject love, reject the family lifestyle. He's like, oh, I'll be damned. Yeah. The one you fight with, the one most like you. And he's like, come on in, we'll have a drink, assess the damage, right? I can't remember the dude's name, but that portrayal of the cranky old man, and then really commiserating with somebody else who's like, I've chosen the cranky lifestyle. He's like, good, you're one of me now. You're one of us. Like we're going to reject the world. That was such a depressing thing. And it is optimistic, I think, at the end of that movie when, Vince Vaughn goes back to Reese Witherspoon. It's like, okay, we got to make this happen. Because it's almost like I don't want to be that guy on the porch.
Yeah. And you kind of have to lift up the veil some to see that you don't want that. And thankfully for me, in my situation, I thought that's what I wanted. And the community that I found myself in pulled me out of that and grew from there, which is pretty freaking awesome.
Good for you.
Yeah, it was fun. And you can't escape it. I think that's the other thing for people who are listening who, you don't have to go full on 2 feet in, but there's like this balance we can all find of, we all hunt at the grocery store. That's fine. But like to get a little more connected, like we're not as far removed from our ancestors who were running around with atlatls, chasing animals than most people think. Taking time to understand how that food is processed, taking time to just understand, even if you like a tri-tip.
I love it. I love a good tri-tip.
Yeah, we're just understanding where that comes from on the animal. For that instance, when you do, everything shuts down, you hit a cow with your car, like, you at least want to be able to pull the tri-tip off, right? Or
listen, if everything shuts down and I hit an animal, I'm gonna be pissed that my car is busted but it'll probably be useless too, because how much gas am I going to be able to get? It's also like that scene from War of the Worlds with Tom Cruise where he's like, don't get around crowds. And then he has a car that works. And then, somebody gets shot stealing the car. There are a lot of different problems if I hit a cow and everything shut down, but I appreciate where you come from. Listen, I want to read this book. I want to do another conversation with you after I read it. Perfect. Thank you for bringing me a copy. And I'm definitely coming up to Atlanta and seeing what's going on up there.
Anytime you want, man.
God, I'll tell you.
Open door.
I can't wait. We also got to get some training in, which will be awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming. Is there anything you'd like to say? You have your own podcast. What is it? How can people find you?
People can find me on Instagram, but begrudgingly to me, it's at Let Me Die Learning, which is pretty apropos, I guess. And then the podcast is called the Okayest Trapper Podcast. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube. I have a lot of great guests on, geared more towards new trappers. So anybody looking to get into it or is interested in trapping, definitely check it out.
Fantastic. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you.
Appreciate it, man.
MTU Studios is the proud producer for the Ada County Sheriff Podcast, the Idaho Wildlife Federation Podcast, the State Representative Ted Hill Podcast, the Idaho State PTA Podcast, and many more. If you or your organization is thinking about starting a podcast, MTU Studios would love to help. Just check out mtustudios.com.